Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society Linux SIG meeting for the month of May 2026. I'm going to open the floor to any questions, problems, etc., even though we did discuss one thing before the meeting started. One tip I want to give out before I forget about it. What I learned recently, one of the key differences between snap packages and flat packs, and this is critical, both do sandboxing. However, the way Ubuntu does it on snap packs is only valid sandboxing on Ubuntu distros. If you use snap packs on other distros, they will run, but they are not sandboxed. And that means that if it's a potentially rogue package that you install from some unknown site that you don't know about, anything about, it could unleash malicious content into your operating system. And then you'll have a big headache. So if you're going to use snap packs, use them only on Ubuntu. I have had one instance on the one version of Ubuntu that I do run on one machine. It was Brave browser. It would not work right. It was very unstable. So I installed the support for Flatpak in that Ubuntu, and then I downloaded Brave browser Flatpak, and I haven't had a problem ever since. Peter?
Yeah, so is Mint a version of Ubuntu?
Pardon? I missed something.
Is Mint a version of Ubuntu?
No, you don't think of it that way. It has the foundations of Ubuntu, but it is not a classified Ubuntu application. So if you install the support for snap packs in Mint and then install a snap package in the Mint, it will not be protecting you with sandboxing like a Flatpak. There are a lot of distros that are based on Debian, a lot of them that are based upon Ubuntu. There are at least a few that also copy Mint, because Mint changes a lot of characteristics. Mint automatically disables snap package, and you have to manually override it. That's one of the key differences. Anybody got any other questions, comments, problems?
Yeah, I've got a problem
Yeah.
with I can't seem to get my printer to work with Linux. It works great with my iPad and my other in Windows, but Linux, for some reason or other, is not working.
You got to understand, when it comes to Wi-Fi devices as well as printers, a lot of them are designed strictly for Windows, and they will not always work with Linux. And if they do work, sometimes they are limited in their functionality compared to Windows.
It used to work.
So, Wayne,
If it used to work.
Wayne, first, which Linux are you using?
Mint, Linux Mint.
Current Mint 22.3?
Latest one.
Okay. Second, what is your printer make and model?
It's HP.
Any idea which HP?
Yeah, it's an HP Color Laser Pro MP or MFP 3301.
And how many years old is the printer?
Probably a year.
1 year. Yeah. you're possibly going to run into problems with HP printers in Linux. They are not noted for providing proper drivers or firmware. You may be able to find firmware extra or firmware updates that may help, and you may have something. Well, I would not recommend going through all the steps you need to get all the drivers just right, but there are ways, maybe.
In Mint,
My Epson is a supported printer.
in Mint, go to the start button, bring up your start menu, and look for hardware drivers, and see if it finds something. It may find something and solve your problem, but I wouldn't bet on it because it's only a year old.
Well, it
And
used to work. You know, when I first,
well, whatever version you had prior to that did have something, but when you updated to the most current version, that changed. And that's very common in all OSs. I don't care if it's Windows, Mac, or Linux.
Wayne, just a question. Are you using it on Wi-Fi or are you able to plug in a cable and
well, that's
try it?
Wi-Fi.
Or you know if it'll work with a cable? Maybe that'll be your answer.
Well, here's the other thing too. Now you say it's a setup for Wi-Fi. Are you sure the address you have in Mint is the same address the printer is set to?
Well, it finds the printer when
Yeah.
I turn Mint on.
Wayne, I found just through a quick search, there is a framework that HP uses. It's called the HP Linux Image and Printing Software, HPLIP. It is available in Linux. You just do sudo apt update, sudo apt install HPLIP. Try that.
That sounds like a good solution.
HPLIP.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what HP recommends for Linux, including Mint.
more and more of the hardware vendors are starting to give more support to Linux.
And
That's
the
a
second,
positive.
the second thing, by the way, there is a GUI for it, which you should install. It's separate. It's just called HPLIP-GUI. So you install that as well.
Oh, good. You don't have to do it from the command line.
Okay.
You could, but you don't have to. And then once you get it ready, get the HPLIP in there, there is a wizard, and there is a command called HP-setup. See if it'll work.
Okay.
Got nothing to lose
Yeah.
but your sanity.
Well,
I tried the troubleshooter and it doesn't work worth a damn.
Not without the HPLIP.
yeah. You only have half the communications set up. It's recognizing the printer exists, but you don't speak the same language right now with the current Mint that the HP printer requires.
Yes. And one other thing, there may be permissions issues. Linux is full of those. And there is some advice in what I found about dealing with permissions. But just see what happens.
Okay.
These are some common things as you upgrade software. I mean, around Christmas time when we get version 23, that may create another set of problems that didn't exist before. It's quite common. They try and ferret out as many of the problems as possible through what's called release candidates and the people that run the release candidates to try and find problems before the general public gets their hands on the version. It's better than Microsoft's way of doing it. Apparently, there aren't enough people in the insiders program of Windows to run that version with all their stuff, trying to find problems and properly reporting them, and hopefully getting somebody to address them. But Microsoft has a kind of a scale. You got to have quite a few people reporting the same basic problem before they start getting the attention of the programming staff. And the more that occur, the more attention will be given to it. The less reporting of problems, the less likely it's going to be fixed before it's released eventually to the public. So this is the life in Linux, but it's generally getting better, mostly because there are more and more hardware vendors that are attempting to try and provide needed drivers for the Linux community. And once those get incorporated, you have either to wait for a kernel that gets those drivers installed in the kernel,
Yeah.
or you have to do something that I did, 15, 20 years ago in Linux. You had to do a mod probe installation of the driver, which temporarily attaches that driver to the kernel so that whatever the device is, it will work as well as the driver allows it to do. And that way you can end up getting much better results early. But most people, I guarantee you, will not go through mod probe to install a new driver. They'll just sit and wait for a new kernel that incorporates it.
Yeah, and there is a trend among most distros to move the drivers outside of the kernel and into other areas of the operating system, other areas of the root file system. That's why there's been an increase in the number of firmware updates, and there's been an increase the drivers simply go into a different place.
Yeah, and which is essentially what happens with Windows. I'm not sure about Mac.
Actually, Windows is a whole lot more complicated.
Well, it's more complicated, but it's the drivers are outside basically the kernel, stored in a specific area. And
well, they're not just they're not all in one place in Windows, and nothing is in one place for drivers in Windows. It's weird, and the way they handle device IDs is also weird.
Oh, there's a lot of weird stuff in there. And
but anyway, Linux, which we're talking about, is far simpler, and you might just possibly be able to grasp what's going on. And that makes possible better control. For example, over USB devices, you can use a program like USB Guard in Linux to guard at least partially against USB devices misidentifying themselves as in bad USB. Windows doesn't have anything like that.
Right. But it is not foolproof against malware that might be on
No.
it.
No, there's direct firmware to firmware infection that you can't do anything about.
Right. And it's a case where if they've been saying this for several years, if you see a flash drive out on the street, the sidewalk, etc., ignore it. Or better yet, pick it up and put it in a trash bin, period.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea what could be on there, and most often it is malware that will just wreak havoc on any computer you plug that into.
The printer error that I'm getting, it shows that my color printer, so forth, CUPS-PKI-invalid.
Yep, that's a cups message. Cups, it can be difficult to set up, but again, the HPLIP software may ease that issue.
I
Yeah.
think that I've got that in under applications.
Have you run it?
That's what I'm trying to get it to work.
You run the software first, then connect the printer, if it can connect,
Well,
and
there's
then use the wizard.
okay. There's an HP LIP toolbox.
Well, there may be something in there.
Yeah, let me try that.
I mean, we're probably not going to solve this problem right here and now, but maybe.
It says a no installed devices found.
Reinstall device what?
No installed HP devices found.
Well, that means it hasn't detected your printer.
And yet it shows when I turn it on, it comes up with it.
The problem there may be that Cups detected it, but the HP software didn't.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay, I'll try it.
That's another thing you got to remember, Earl. Excuse me, Wayne.
Wayne.
Bottom line, you have address for the printer that you had to set up at the printer. Then you have to set up your operating system software for the printer for that address. However, this is the gotcha that most people always stumble over. One problem is the address is set up usually by DHCP on the computer side. What you need is a static address set up for that printer that never changes, just like your house number, just like your social security number. They never change. But DHCP says, hey, if I haven't renewed my lease on that number for a certain period of time, it's will reassign later a new address. Now the two addresses do not match, and it's just like a postal worker. Hey, this address doesn't match this physical address, so I take it back to the post office, and they return it to the sender.
So anyway, Wayne, with the printer plugged in, the next step that's supposed to happen is run in the command line HP-setup.
HP what?
HP-setup. If you've got all that
Okay.
HPLIP already. HP-setup. Then something should come up. Either in the terminal.
I'm now in the open printing cups thing.
Did the HP setup send you there?
No, it was yeah.
HP setup did send you there.
Yeah, the HP device manager got me there.
So when you ran HP setup, it went into device manager.
Device.
Is that what it did?
I don't know. It's
I would close cups. I would close cups.
yeah, I did.
And then see what HP-setup does. What does it open?
I got HP refreshing device list.
Okay, let it refresh. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it needs to do. Maybe it'll find it.
Yeah, I can't find it.
Cups may have said it's my device.
Yeah. That happens.
There we go. HP Linux imaging and printing. It's got to. I've got to some sort of website. It's called SourceForge,
SourceForge is okay.
and it's HP Linux imaging and printing. Download. So
It may need that.
yeah, so I'll download that then.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that installs, but it may need that.
Yeah, okay.
So that's progress.
Yeah,
There is something out there.
yeah.
Now, Wayne, you're lucky because a lot of new hardware, especially CPUs, they are having real headaches with some distros of Linux. They're getting necessary interface and drivers set up as fast as they can. But a lot of people who've tried it on brand new hardware sometimes run into real migraines. And it may not be solved for a long time because some drivers they may never see. So what has to happen is one or more of the people that work with that software operating system try and reverse engineer the software necessary to interface to that device. And that takes a long time to ferret out all the ins and outs that they possibly can. And it's never 100% like it would be on Windows. Okay, does anybody have anything else? Okay, assume that means we don't have anything else to do. And I'm going to switch. Come on. All right. And get off of there.
Okay, so Wayne, at the end of the meeting, let us know if you do anything more.
Yeah, okay.
There's an end to the meeting?
Sometimes it seems there isn't.
Yeah, too often. Okay.
Well, I'm now subscribed to receive updates for HP Linux imaging and printing.
Right now, that'd probably be good. Let's see what Tim has to present.
Well, okay.
Oh, no.
Unless Pete has something final to say.
Yeah. Got a question. Is the G parted that comes inside Mint the same as the G parted that's outside?
I can tell you one thing about that, Peter. You will want, for your purposes, to be running gparted live from a USB outside of the operating system
Well, you can also use,
or off of an install disk.
or you can use a Ventoy or Yummy and just run the ISO directly.
Which is the USB method. Yes.
Okay. Thank you on that.
Where the heck? There we go. No, that's something else. Oh boy. Hang on. I don't want that either. I forgot to set a setting. Got it finally. Come on. Now, let's see if I can get this stupid thing to work.
Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time I'm going to talk about the expiry of secure boot certificates in June and October 2026. This is unlikely to cause problems for most users, but it does affect the vast majority of computers running Windows 11 or Windows 10, as well as Linux installations that use secure boot. And so, in this video, I'm going to explain what's happening and what you may potentially need to do. Secure Boot is a security feature included in the motherboard UEFI firmware of most desktops and laptops. Its purpose is to ensure that a computer only boots using software that's trusted by its original equipment manufacturer or which comes from a trusted software provider such as Microsoft. When a computer is powered up, Secure Boot checks the signatures of each piece of pre-boot software, including firmware drivers and the operating system bootloader. And if these signatures are validated against a database of trusted certificates, the PC boots and control is passed to the operating system. Secure Boot therefore prevents malware such as a rootkit from loading when a computer starts. Secure Boot relies on digital certificates stored in a computer's non-volatile memory or NVRAM. Microsoft first issued Secure Boot certificates in 2011. However, in June and October 2026, these initial certificates will expire and need to be replaced. Computers manufactured in 2024 and onwards potentially already have the new Microsoft certificates, but most computers require an update. Here we can see the 3 certificates that are going to expire, which appear on 4 rows because the last one is being replaced by 2 others. And all 4 of the replacement certificates were created in 2023. Note that in the certificate names, CA stands for Certificate Authority, and indeed what we're talking about is sometimes referred to as the transition from CA 2011 to CA 2023. Some expiring certificates are stored in DB, which refers to the Secure Boot Authorized Signature database. Meanwhile, the first certificate is stored in the KEK. This refers to the Key Enrollment Key database, which stores signing keys which are trusted to make database changes. 2 such databases exist, the DB Authorized Signature database, as I've just mentioned, and DBX, which is a database of blacklisted forbidden signatures. The first expiring certificate, Microsoft Corporation KEK-CA 2011, controls changes to the allowed and blacklisted signature databases. Meanwhile, the second, the Microsoft Windows Production PCA or Product Control Authority 2011 certificate, signs the bootloader for Windows itself. The final expiring certificate is called Microsoft UEFI CA 2011 and is being replaced by 2 new ones. The first of these will sign third-party bootloaders. Meanwhile, the second will sign third-party option ROMs, which are firmware drivers contained in hardware such as GPUs or network controllers. So, what Microsoft is doing during renewal is facilitating finer control by splitting its third-party certificate in 2. The Secure Boot certificates listed in this table are required on a Windows PC. However, most Linux distros that support Secure Boot achieve this by using an intermediate bootloader called a shim, which is signed by the Microsoft UEFI certificate. And the KEK certificate is also used by Linux for database updates. Linux distros do this because most motherboard manufacturers only install Microsoft certificates, and so their expiry affects computers running both Windows and Linux. So, what's happening in June 2026 and what action may be required? Well, starting with Windows, here we're on the relevant Microsoft page, which I'll link in the video description. If we scroll down to the Impact section, we see that devices that haven't received the new 2023 certificate will continue to start and operate normally, and standard Windows updates will continue to install. However, these devices will no longer be able to receive new security protections for the early boot process. This makes it clear that certificate expiration should only impact security rather than computer operation. However, there is a caveat which we'll come to in a second. The good news is that most Windows computers will receive the updated Secure Boot certificates automatically. Specifically, if you are running Windows 11 Home, Pro or Education, you should receive the new certificates in the background via Windows Update. Meanwhile, if you are running Windows 10 Home, Pro or Education, you should get the new certificates automatically if you are enrolled for Extended Security Updates or ESUs. This all noted, when and even if you will get the new Secure Boot certificates automatically can depend on your hardware and how up to date its UEFI firmware happens to be. In addition, back here on the Microsoft page, if we scroll up and click on Windows devices for home users, businesses and schools with Microsoft managed updates, and then on the resultant page scroll down to troubleshooting, we can see that in a few cases your device might not start, or you might experience a BitLocker recovery situation when receiving the new certificates. As the page then details, in the first of these situations, the fix is to disable Secure Boot. You can do this by holding down the appropriate key to enter your computer's UEFI interface during boot, and then selecting the appropriate option. Which key to press depends on your computer, but it's often Escape, Delete, or F2. And once in the UEFI interface, Secure Boot is usually an option under Security, where it can be turned on or off as required. To check if a computer has received automatic certificate updates, we can look in the Windows Security app. In Windows 11 and Windows 10, this can often be accessed by clicking on the security icon on the taskbar. However, if, as on this system, the icon is not set to display, go to Search and start typing Security, which should bring up Windows Security so you can click on it. Once in the Windows Security app, next click on Device Security. Here, if Secure Boot is activated, you'll find an entry for it under which a range of possible messages may be displayed. And if, as here, this reads Secure Boot is on and all required certificate updates have been applied, no further certificate changes are needed, then everything has already updated automatically and all is okay. However, you may not see this message. And to demonstrate, let's go back in time on this computer, which 6 days ago displayed Secure Boot is on, preventing malicious software from loading when your device starts up. And whilst this sounds reassuring, it's not good news, as it means that Windows has not been updated to display the latest Secure Boot certificate status, and you almost certainly do not have the new Secure Boot certificates. To explain, in April 2026, Microsoft started rolling out an update to the Windows Security app, which refined its reporting of Secure Boot states. And we'll come back to this page very shortly. However, back on our machine when it was displaying this old message, updates were required, which I'd not installed so I could show you the old Secure Boot message. But let's now get them installed. There we go, and if we now look in the Windows Security app, we'll first see that nothing has changed, as for many Secure Boot related updates, a second reboot is required. So let's do that, and return to Windows Security, where now, even though Secure Boot has a green tick, we get a new message which states Secure Boot is on, but your device is using an older boot trust configuration that should be updated. According to Microsoft, this message means that Windows may need to perform further updates, or that another reboot is required. At this point, I went off to have a nice cup of tea, and when I returned 20 minutes later and had rebooted again, the message had updated to include there is not yet enough data to classify your device for automatic update. According to Microsoft, this means that a computer may need additional validation. However, in practice, this message usually seems to mean that you need to wait for the new certificate updates to be rolled out to your particular hardware configuration. And indeed, if you see an older boot trust configuration message, my advice is to wait to see if Windows Update sorts things out. And on this machine, this is also exactly what happened, as 6 days later, I got the message that the new certificates have been applied and everything is okay. Whilst making this video, I've asked a lot of people what secure boot status messages they were receiving. And I've found out that many people have had to wait for several days in the intermediate state. However, in the vast majority of cases, Windows Update did sort things out without the user having to do anything other than be patient for a few planetary rotations. This said, in some cases, a computer's UEFI firmware may be unable to accept the new certificates, so a manual update may be required. And I'll cover this in the next part of the video. However, before that, let's return to Microsoft's page about updated secure boot status messages, where, as we can see, it's possible that you may see an amber or red warning. As described below, this can signal that your secure boot certificates are fully updated, not yet updated, or that automatic updates are not supported. If we scroll down further and open things up, we can see 6 possible status messages, the first of which is for fully complete, whilst the second is one of the older boot trust messages we've just seen. There's then another possible message that reports if updates are paused by a known issue that will automatically resolve, which is followed by the second older boot trust message we've just seen. Finally, there are 2 possible messages that you may get if automated secure boot update is not supported on your computer. So, what if you get a message saying that automatic updates are not supported? Or if you get stuck with an older boot trust message that won't advance to the final stage? Well, in the first circumstance and possibly in the second, you may need to perform a firmware update. I personally had a machine that seemed to be stuck with an older boot trust message, although in time it may have updated automatically. But I decided to update its firmware both to demonstrate the process in this video and because I'm impatient. However, I would stress that there is always a small risk when updating a computer's UEFI firmware, or what many motherboard manufacturers still refer to as its BIOS. And this risk is that you may brick your motherboard and render it unusable. Assuming that you do decide to perform a firmware update, it's important to note that the exact process does vary between manufacturers and hardware. And so, whilst I'm about to give you a demonstration, things may well look different on your system. But for a desktop PC, the basic process is usually to download a new BIOS file from your motherboard manufacturer's website and then to enter the BIOS and flash this to the motherboard. To do this, I first visited the web pages for my motherboard, where I went to support and under BIOS downloaded the latest available file to a USB drive that must be formatted FAT32. Next, I went to the USB drive and extracted the downloaded zip file in the same location. And, depending on your motherboard, this may or may not be necessary. But personally, I always unzip BIOS downloads as it avoids having to come back and do it later if required. Next, I rebooted the computer, entered its BIOS by pressing in my case the F2 key, and clicked to enter QFlash, which is the firmware update utility on a Gigabyte motherboard. Here I then selected the new BIOS file that I downloaded to the USB drive, confirmed that I wanted to update the BIOS, and waited for the file to be verified. Finally, I clicked Start, accepted the required reboot, and whilst waiting nervously, I crossed my fingers that the latest firmware update did include the new Secure Boot certificates. After the system successfully restarted, over in the Windows Security app, nothing had changed. So I performed a second reboot, and here we are. The new certificates are installed and no further ones are needed. For me, a firmware update therefore worked to get the new certificates more rapidly than via Windows Update. However, this may not always be the case, and you may still need to wait for further Windows Update activity to get the new certificates. It just depends on whether the BIOS update actually includes the new certificates or just enables their installation. Right, let's turn to Linux. And it's worth remembering that Secure Boot certificates are stored in a computer's NVRAM. So if you have a dual boot setup, it doesn't matter if Windows or Linux installs the new certificates. Just as in Windows, expired Secure Boot certificates should not stop a Linux system from booting, although it may not be possible to do a new install with Secure Boot active if you don't have the new certificates. Fortunately, many distros are providing the new certificates via their standard software updater. For example, when I recently looked at Fedora 44, by chance I managed to capture this screen where the new certificates were just a few clicks away. To check on your Secure Boot status and if you have the new certificates, in Linux we can use the mock or machine owner keys utility. Specifically, we can enter this command to find out if Secure Boot is enabled or disabled. So here we go, and there we are, it is enabled on this system. To find out which certificates are installed, we can also use mockutil to check what's stored in the Secure Boot Authorized Signature Database, or DB, or the Key Enrollment Database, or KEK, as I discussed earlier. Let's start with the latter, where we enter this command, and it lists all the keys. I've started with this command because there are fewer keys. There's only 2 keys here. Let's go right back to the top. You'll see here we have a key 1, and we can see this key is Microsoft Corporation KEK CA 2011, which expires in June 2026. This is the old certificate. But if we scroll down, we will find we've also got key 2, and this is the new one. This is Microsoft Corporation KEK2 KCA 2023, and this expires in 2038. Yes, we're going to be doing this all again in 2038. So let's also take a look at DB. We'll first of all clear the screen to make life a little bit easier, and now execute this again, but with a DB on the end. You've probably guessed that. A lot more certificates, and I think we'll make life easy by doing a search for 2038. And there we are. We found a new certificate there, the Microsoft Option ROM UEFI CA 2023, expiring in 2038. So it's clear on this system we do have the new certificates. And this is not a surprise, as this is the same PC we've been working on in Windows. And sadly, I don't now have a computer left without the new certificates installed and which will accept them without a BIOS update, which is something I've just demonstrated. And therefore, I cannot fully demonstrate for you manual Secure Boot certificate installation in Linux. However, this can be achieved using the firmware update daemon, and I'll demonstrate as much as I can. So let's first of all clear the screen, where we would start by refreshing the firmware metadata. And we do this using this command, firmware update manager refresh, which here just reports everything is up to date. Secondly, having refreshed the metadata, you could check if any updates were available using this command, get updates. And again, on this device, there were no updatable devices. But if there were, you could use the update command, which is this, which, if I execute it here, will simply tell us again there were no updatable devices. But if there were, this command should download the new Secure Boot certificate ready to inject into NVRAM on the next reboot. And do remember, 2 reboots are often required. And I will of course list these commands in the video description. For most people, Secure Boot certificate expiry will be dealt with automatically and won't cause any issues. However, I would advise checking if you've got the new Secure Boot certificates, and if you haven't, to keep on checking and potentially take manual action. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press
Now, okay. Now, here's a couple things that I've learned since this came up, and Earl's the one that sent me this one, but I already had it in my list anyway. If you get in Windows the certificate update, instead of doing a double restart to configure your system, it does an extra restart, and that's when it's updating the certificate. It has to do that separately. Now, as far as some of the commands he gave here at the end for Linux, I tried that out on at least 2 of my systems. One system showed absolutely no available updates. The other one said there was one, but when it came to executing the firmware update, none took place because they were not the right ones for that machine. Now, in addition, we have a situation where there's concern about Linux. Okay, well, lots of the distros that are out there for Linux do not require EFI partition, and many don't even require the boot partition. However, in those cases, this certificate on a Linux only box is a non-starter. It will not affect booting up the computer. Now, if you have one of the distros where you do have an EFI partition, if you have Secure Boot in the BIOS turned off, it will have no effect whether you've got the updated certificate or not. It'll boot up. Now, I have no idea, once you got your system up and running, if anything, the operating system or application programs check that certificate for validation. If it does, that might cause a problem. But at the moment, I have heard nothing about that possibility. But the primary purpose of the boot certificate is, again, in Microsoft's terminology, a security issue. And basically, the security issue probably should have been addressed much sooner than 2024. Should have been probably 2020 or 2018, something like that, because they were having problems as is with malware affecting the boot process. So it's kind of a moot point with most Linux distros that are installed on systems right now, because the worst thing that might happen is you have an EFI partition, you have secure boot turned on, and it will not boot. As long as you can get into the BIOS, you can turn off secure boot and the system will boot up normally. If you want to have the secure boot active, then you're going to have to go through the manual processes to try and get the update. BIOS updates. Many systems, not necessarily all systems, especially very old systems, have dual boot images. And the reason for that is when it updates a new BIOS, it updates only one version. The other version is left as a backup. You have to read the manufacturer's information if the BIOS fails to update to how to get it to boot to that backup version, and you're back in business, and maybe the manufacturer can give you some information as to why it failed. Maybe there was a bug in the BIOS update. They may issue a new version. You try out the new version. Maybe that one works, and you got all your problems solved, basically. So it depends upon a lot of circumstances. It's not a simple like yes and no solution to a problem. There are many variables involved, and you have to understand enough of the variables to know where your problem lies. This is Earl's requested discussion. So Earl and anybody else, does anybody have further questions or comments?
Well, if Earl doesn't have anything to say, if he does have something to say, I'd like to hear from him.
That's why I mentioned
Earl, you're muted.
No, thanks for that explanation. It is rather confusing, and it needed an explanation. I think you did a nice job. Thanks.
Okay.
And now the one thing I encountered with my new framework laptop is that there are conditions under which a Linux formatted USB drive may not be recognized by the BIOS because of secure boot. And then you cannot boot from that device. Instead, you have to boot from a file on that device, which is the shim.
Well, that's assuming the shim is also recognized. I've had many cases where the shim is not recognized as valid, and you have headaches trying to get it to boot up off of that drive.
Yes, that can happen. However, as far as I'm concerned, I have very recently installed Linux from recent versions, and it's all very mainstream stuff, mostly on LMDE. So it's Linux Mint basically, and or Debian. And the Debian shim currently works. The Debian shim may be slow to update this time around. So you don't know whether it'll work in June or October.
The question I would have is on the USB device, if it's bootable, is it a case where it's outdated and therefore you basically need to create a new version of the USB device to get it in compliance?
No, the USB device would probably need a firmware update if that would solve the problem. But I think the way this happened, it's in an area of the BIOS that is not user accessible, so it's probably a blacklist. Or there's a whitelist and this thing isn't on it.
I'll be honest, I've never heard of a firmware update for a USB device.
This has an enclosure, which does have a controller.
The external housings those might get a firmware update, but a regular flash drive does not.
Flash drives, no. SD cards, no. SD cards are very locked down. And in fact, they're not very vulnerable to bad USB for that reason. But enclosures or these portable drives, like the WD passports, etc., they can get firmware updates if one is available.
Okay, that's a good
And
piece of information.
there is a WD utility for doing that for SSDs. WD and SanDisk, I think it is, now are the same company.
Right. That is correct. And right now, there seems to be some kind of a price cut if you're interested. A 2 terabyte Western Digital, I think it's SN 7100 is available. Newegg has it going for $300 versus $400 or $500.
Yeah, I got a similar deal on by going online versus retail bricks and mortar store for the 1 terabyte version of the same sort of drive. It's a WD Black, and that was for me somewhere in the neighborhood of 150, whereas it would have been 200 plus, maybe closer to 300 at retail.
Yeah, yeah.
Must have been some old stock or something.
Well, I don't know if it's overstock or if it's been replaced by another version, and therefore they're discounting that a particular version. But it also depends upon the vendor who's selling it, getting a new stock with a deal from them at the lower price. Therefore, they're given part or all of that discount they receive to the buying customer.
Mine may have been an older model because the first thing that the WD software wanted to do was update the firmware.
Yeah, it sounds realistic to my way of thinking that. I have seen that happen before in other cases. It's just one of the quirks, but at least it's now got a 2 terabyte drive that's a little more reasonable than what it was, figuratively speaking, yesterday. And
Yeah,
we need all the discounts we can get because there's a lot of peripheral, I'll call them, hardware vendors that right now, many of them are really looking bleak with declining sales drastically, and whether or not they can survive this. Because right now it's classified by many that consumer electronics related to computers, which includes a smartphone and tablets, is a dead market because all of the manufacturers are going big time with data centers and enterprise customers. That's where the money is made and not with the consumer. Even NVIDIA just recently in their books decided to not separate out consumer purchases of GPUs of NVIDIA type, and they just roll it into the stuff, regular business stuff. So you can't break it out to see how things are trending in the use of discrete GPUs or GPU chips in high-end laptops, usually a gaming type laptop. All right, anything further on this one topic? Okay, and I'll move on. Come on. Oh, wait a minute. Boy, playing with 4 computers and 2 different keyboards and mice. This would be a headache.
Microsoft has announced Azure Linux 4, which is, and this is all a very real thing for all of you excited to run Microsoft Linux. It is built on top of Fedora Linux. Previously, all the versions of Azure Linux were kind of made from scratch RPM based distros, but this is actually literally just kind of like a Fedora Linux respin. And it's also the first version of Azure Linux, the first version of any Linux distro from Microsoft that is a general purpose distribution. It's still focused on running inside the Azure cloud and all that good stuff, or all that bad stuff, depending on your feelings of Azure. But it's the first one that's really a general purpose Linux distribution, which means once it's out in the wild, once the binary releases are available, which could be any time now, you can run Microsoft Linux on your desktop. I don't know how many of you out there actually want to do that, but you could. It should be noted, Microsoft first started releasing Azure-focused Linux distributions back in 2018, roughly 8 years ago. But again, this is the first time the distribution is planned to be more of a general purpose server system. But I mean, you could use it as a workstation as well if you wanted to. But I wanted to point something out here because I think it's somewhat interesting. While this is the first general purpose Linux distribution from Microsoft, it's not the only general purpose Linux distribution that Microsoft employees are in charge of. Bazite, a Linux distribution which focuses on gaming and is also based on Fedora, is run by a Microsoft employee, as well as Anduin, and there's a couple of other random hodgepodge Linux distros out there that are run by Microsoft employees. In fact, it's amazing how many Linux distributions are either run by Microsoft employees like Bazite or have significant contributors who are Microsoft full-time employees. I think if you went back in time to say the late 90s, early 2000s, and you had told most Linux nerds that was a thing, that just a sprinkling of Linux distributions across the land would all be run by Microsoft employees. And oh, and by the way, there's an official Microsoft Linux distribution. I think people would be flipping tables over. I think there'd be some angry Linux nerds from the late 90s, man. They wouldn't have put up with that. But that's the reality. That's where we live now. I want to say this, that this is still in development. In fact, if you go to go to the github.com/Microsoft/Azure Linux, you can find the details of Azure Linux 3 and Azure Linux 4. Version 4, which is the one that's going forward, going to be based on Fedora, hasn't been released as a binary release yet, but you can grab all the code for it and build it. And if you read all the documentations to get up and running on it, you can be running Azure Linux 4 right now with a little bit of work. Once it's a binary release, I don't know. Like I don't envision a future where I sit down and load my laptops up with Azure Linux 4. But my guess is, watch for it. A number of the tech journalists out there will do reviews of Azure Linux 4, and it will be glowing. No matter what, it will be an overly positive review. Just watch for it. ZDNet and a bunch of other outlets will undoubtedly cover the launch and do a review on it, and it'll be a positive one. I'm just saying. Who knows why? Wink, wink, wink. One thing I wanted to note here, besides the fact that Azure Linux 4 is based on Fedora, which I think is kind of interesting, an interesting decision all by itself, is that the Azure Linux 4 development process, the people in charge of it, have adopted a code of conduct for it. Okay, that's not terribly surprising. Microsoft adopts codes of conduct for all of their open source project, and they've chosen to go with a variation of the contributor covenant code of conduct. which, as many of you know, was created with the express purpose of pushing political agendas with inside organizations. The guy that created it, who identifies as a trans lady, his name is Corey MK. He created it and immediately started using it to attack projects which were not friendly to transgenders enough. It became kind of a tool for pushing political change within open source projects, and it was effective. We saw those projects that adopted the contributor covenant code of conduct move significantly to the left in their political actions, and in fact went from, in many cases, being pure meritocracies focused on code to being essentially political action committees, right? They're their own little things where they focus on politics, in many cases, almost more than code nowadays. And a lot of that can be traced to the contributor covenant, which Microsoft has adopted for Azure Linux 4. Yeah. Okay. I know. I don't know what to think about all that. But it's been a long time coming. I mean, they've had Azure focused distributions for years, for 8 years now. It was inevitable that we would have a more general purpose one. And honestly, it feels almost like it's late. Realistically, I'm not sure why Microsoft didn't have a more general purpose Linux distribution out before now. It seems like it was a good move. I mean, so much of the company now is focused on Azure and making money with Azure, and a huge percentage of that is Linux and Microsoft's own Linux distributions running on top of Azure, that it just makes sense. But here we go again. You all let me know if you install Azure Linux 4 on your laptop and how it goes. I think I'm good for the moment. I don't think I need.
Okay. Now I want to preface this a little bit. I do have a version of Fedora 44. It was 43, so I upgraded it to 44. And I learned a little bit more about Fedora Linux distributions. I have Bazite, but I have never gotten time to sit down and install it on any machine, even on a separate drive, and then connecting it to a computer and booting up from that. One thing I did learn, most of Fedora's distros are including SE Linux, natively all set up. However, now I have the KDE version. I didn't want the workstation version because it's based on GNOME. If you can do these days a regular browser search and put in Fedora spins as a second word, they have also a download site for all the other desktop environments that they support, including Cinnamon. So that's an option too. However, Bazite is considered a gaming distribution that's second place to Casio OS, which is Arch-based. However, there's also one called Nobera. Nobera is based on Fedora, but they do not enable SE Linux on it. So that's one version I know that does not have it. The Fedora version is the main one using the SE Linux. That's top security. However, almost all the other distros use AppArmor, and it's not as feature-rich and capable as SE Linux is, from my understanding. However, you can install SE Linux on Debian base, which includes Ubuntu, Mint, etc. However, it's classified hard because it is a bear to properly configure the whole thing to make it working and secure. If it's on Arch Linux, you want to put SE Linux, it's extremely hard. You might as well quit before you start, from what I'm gathering. So you have to rely upon AppArmor, or you have a distribution that has pre-configured running SE Linux right off the bat. And right now, Fedora is the major one. I haven't had time to check OpenSUSE, which is again trying to be sold, but the project continues forward and people are continuing to work on OpenSUSE. I used to use SUSE itself before it became a commercial product like Red Hat Fedora. The Fedora is the equivalent of Chromium browser compared to Chrome. Chrome is the production commercial version, and Chromium is the test bed where they test out different things to see how well they work, how much they're used, etc., etc. Well, Fedora is that same way for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's also interesting from this article here that you have Microsoft using IBM's Fedora package, which is updated every 6 months. So that means, I forget exactly, I think it was April of this year that I went from 43 to 44. So somewhere around October or thereabouts, we should see version 45 that I would have to update to. Though, because the Fedora ecosystem only supports the version you install for 13 months. Therefore, that's 2 updates that will occur during the life of that one version, like my 44. 1 month later, if you haven't updated to the most current version or the next version, such as 45, you may not be able to run the Red Hat, the Fedora system at all, and you may have to do a complete clean install of a newer version of Fedora. So that's something, if anybody's interested, to keep in mind. It is a much more secure base. While I'm in this particular mode, I want to mention one other thing while Earl is here. Earl is waiting for KDE OS. Well, at my last check, don't hold your breath. You will expire long before it ever gets released, I think. That's my honest opinion. But the funny thing is, you got KDE Neon, and that is the current version of that KDE supports the most. So why you want to move to one, an Arch base versus the Ubuntu base, which is more user friendly, I don't know. I am a person who does have Arch distros. They can be a royal pain in the butt, and a lot of things you have to do manually. That's the problem that I'm sure the KDE OS team is running into right now. How to take and get KDE environment to be able to update some of these things more simplistically, like it is on KDE Neon. That's a big factor. And as far as going to RFS versus Extent 4. I've been on both. And I'll say at the moment that I noticed the BTRFS, even though there's been an upgrade since the version I had that made some improvements, it is slower than an Extent 4 format. Okay, on this general topic here, I had to throw this in when I came across it. How many of you are going to go to Azure Linux 4 when it gets released? Come now. I might even grab a copy just to see what the hell it looks like compared to my 44. Doesn't mean I'll keep it up and going, but just see what it's like. I like experimenting and seeing how some of these different distros look and feel, and how stable they are. And really, the Arch Linux is not known for being the most stable operating system platform. So keep that in mind also. All right, if there's no other comments, questions, etc., I'll move on. And I gotta keep my hands off of that. Okay.
This week's surveillance report covers the most severe Linux threat in years that has sent researchers and distributions scrambling. Apple is patching that weird bug that police were using to extract deleted signal messages from iPhones. Utah has this new weird law regulating VPNs and trying to make those much harder to access. And Microsoft Edge just wants to store all your passwords in plain text memory. Just typical Microsoft shenanigans. Welcome to the TechLore Surveillance Report, your essential weekly tech news where I deliver deep analysis on the latest threats to security, privacy, and digital freedom, empowering you to reclaim control and defend your rights. My name is Henry, and a quick note before we get into the news, just have a quick announcement. I owe you all a pretty big apology here, as this episode is landing way later than it should have. We've been working on some big projects back here. We are a two-person team, and a lot of times when we put more emphasis on those, it's really hard to keep up with this, the anchors that we have. Now, we've done some restructuring back here to make this a little bit better. So going forward, I want to really emphasize that consistency a bit more. And I just wanted to get something out this week. And so today's episode is a little bit lighter. I'm just going to cover the most major stories. That way we can at least get this news out and get back on track. Let's start with two really crazy Linux stories. The first one being the most severe Linux threat to surface in years. Now, if you're reading news or you keep up with this kind of stuff, the way that this attack is overall referred to is called copy fail, which is one word. Now, the overall idea of this is that it gives an attacker root access to Linux machines without many restrictions. It's quite interesting. Now, what copy fail does, it's described as a critical flaw. It's a local privilege escalation, which is a vulnerability class that allows unprivileged users to elevate themselves to administrators. The example they use here is that an attacker exploits a known WordPress plugin vulnerability, which we cover practically on a weekly basis at this point, and then it gets shell access. They run this copy fail proof of concept, and they are now root on the host. The way the researchers described this is the vulnerability does not get the attacker onto the box. It changes what happens in the next 10 seconds after they land there. So if this was combined with another vulnerability, it can just take over your machine, which is quite scary. I really want to outline a little bit of the drama around how this came to light because it's quite relevant to the story. Because normally the way that disclosure works, if I am a security researcher and I'm investigating a piece of software and I find something critically wrong with it, what is typically considered reasonable/proper disclosure is I reach out to the affected software vendor, I work with them directly, and then they ideally issue a patch before the public finds out. So that way it's kept low key and attackers can't exploit whatever that security researcher found, assuming they didn't already find it. Now, this didn't quite work that way. A vulnerability analyst here that I'm showing on the article on screen if you're on video, but their name is Will Dorman, said that this org doing the disclosure did an absolutely terrible job of vulnerability coordination, because at the time of making this video, not every Linux distribution is actually patched. Now, they did disclose this weeks before to the Linux kernel security team, and they actually patched that vulnerability in the Linux kernel itself. The problem is that few of the Linux distributions, which are downstream of the Linux kernel and need to actually integrate the Linux kernel into their operating systems, actually incorporated those fixes. Now, this Ars Technica coverage happened last week, and at that time, the only people who actually patched this were Arch Linux, Red Hat, Fedora, SUSE, and Ubuntu. That was kind of it. And so if you had any other distro, it wasn't really known if you were patched. Now, if you're using a different distro from one of those, it's really important to check your distro and see if they have patched this issue. Now, before I share a few more of my takeaways, I wanted to also share this story as well, which came out a few days before that last one, which is there was an open source package with 1 million monthly downloads that stole user credentials. This is a command line interface for a piece of software called Element Data. And what this tool does is it helps users monitor performance anomalies in machine learning systems. It's a very niche tool, but it clearly has a lot of downloads. The developer account was taken over and they published a compromised version of the piece of software. You might be wondering, Henry, what's my takeaway? Well, first off, I just want to zoom out and say that vulnerabilities happen on every operating system, so this isn't a Linux inherent issue, and it goes all directions. And I think that it's also important to debunk the myth that just being on Linux is inherently crazy secure. Now, I do think Linux has a ton of benefits from an open source perspective, from a transparency perspective, from a philosophy perspective, from also sometimes just a usability perspective. I understand why someone would want to use Linux over Windows or Mac OS, especially Windows with how that whole world is going right now. I don't need to expand further than that. But I think it's really important to challenge this overall conception that if you're on Linux, you're resistant to every attack out there. That's just not true. We've seen really severe exploits in the Linux world, and because Linux is just overall this ecosystem of hundreds of different distributions, and it requires more to fix these kind of issues. If Apple catches something like this, they just roll out an update to all their devices and everybody has the update. But with this, it's a little bit harder to do that because it reflects the openness that is the Linux ecosystem. And so whatever distro you're on, it's really important to just do a quick web search and just type in copy fail and then your distro name. And you should get some kind of coverage or some kind of community response to whether or not they have patched this. And I have no issue saying if your Linux distro of choice hasn't made any kind of public statement and isn't communicating this issue to their users, I would genuinely flag that as a real concern and reconsider your Linux distribution of choice. This might sound harsh, but it's for two reasons. One, these are the developers pushing code to your machines, and it's partly their responsibility to keep you safe. And so if your safety isn't a number one concern to them, I would argue that's already sacrificing a major value that a Linux distro is supposed to provide. The other thing is that I think that reflects an overall communication pattern of a project. And so if this project that you're using day to day, if they're not responding to an issue this massive, are they going to respond to an even larger issue? Are they going to respond to their accounts getting compromised? So these are things that I would be thinking about personally. I know the Linux world has everything from Hannah Montana OS to Red Star OS to like actually really legitimate operating systems used day to day to the servers that you connect to. So there is literally the craziest stuff out there to the most legit stuff out there. And so I just want to make sure people are aware of that spectrum when they're moving over to a Linux distro. And to also make sure that you're updating your software and actually getting the latest security updates along the way. It was also quite disappointing for me to read the way that this was disclosed and how there wasn't enough time given to some of these Linux distributions to actually patch the issue. But I was still happy to see some of these major distros, a lot of which we recommend back here, did patch this quite quickly. So those are kind of my initial thoughts there. All right, coming soon, we have Utah's new law regulating VPNs, which is crazy, and we'll talk about what to do there. We also have Microsoft Edge literally saving your passwords in plain text on your computer. Just typical Microsoft stuff lately. But before we get there, very quick signal boost. So we talked recently, I think on the last surveillance report, about how there was essentially this bug/issue, whatever you want to call it, this problem. I don't know how you want to describe this issue, but pretty much there was a court case that came out that revealed that there was a user that was being investigated using the Signal Messenger, the end-to-end encrypted messenger, and pretty much they already deleted the whole Signal app before the law enforcement agents started trying to break into the phone and trying to get access to those messages. Pretty much they were actually able to intercept messages retroactively, even though the Signal app was completely deleted, because of notifications on iOS. Essentially, the operating system, only on iOS, was caching all the notification content locally, even for apps that were already deleted. So that was a pretty serious problem. A lot of people were concerned. We got a huge amount of questions about this, and so I did do coverage for that back then. But the real update here is that you can just update your iPhone to the newest version, and that will even retroactively fix the problem. And so even if your iPhone has been collecting all of your notification content the last 10 years, the moment you update to the latest version of iOS from a couple weeks ago, I know we're a little late on this, this is resolved now. And I think they also pushed out this update to iOS 18 as well. So you don't even have to go to iOS 26 to still get that update on some older devices, or if for whatever reason you don't want to go to iOS 26. So this is a quick signal boost, and it's good to see Apple address this because they don't always address things like this. All right, so we are now going to talk about this new law that came out of Utah, the land of freedom. It is called SB 73. You can read this yourself. I am showing it here on screen and what it looks like. But of course, you can always find this in the show notes down in the description if you want to actually read the bill for yourself. I will be doing a dedicated video on this to dive into it a little bit more, so stay subscribed if you want to see that. It should go live in the next day or so. So pretty much this law builds off of the 2023 law that was their adult content kind of law. Now, this has been happening all around the world. For a little bit of context, we see all these countries and states that are trying to target age verification / adult content websites in the name of keeping children safe, adults safe. It's a bit unclear, and I still haven't really gotten a really good answer as to what the real intention and the real proven benefits are to these kind of things. And it's hard to see this in any kind of optimistic way for me. Now, a big problem for this is that even if we could get a good answer out of these politicians and the people really promoting this stuff, implementing this is very hard and it's quite challenging because of the way the internet works, right? If, Utah's blocking something, but California isn't, someone could just use a California-based VPN, or even just a VPN based out of Utah, but that has servers in California, and just access the site anyway, right? Like, the internet is really hard to censor in the way that they're trying to do. So this already happened yesterday, May 6th. This law was passed that now puts VPNs in the crosshairs of Utah. And the craziest thing is this doesn't just impact you people in Utah, because the law puts the liability on the adult content websites to age check Utah users to fully comply. This means that a website has to verify the ages of every visitor regardless of where their IP address says they're located. So theoretically, if any of you are using a California-based IP, regardless of where you come from, NSFW website doesn't know if you're a Utah resident or not, so they still have to figure out where you're actually residing somehow, I don't know. The same law also prohibits adult content websites from sharing instructions on how to use a VPN, and it creates a 2% tax for transactions on online pornography websites. It's actually quite interesting because here is a direct quote from a Republican sponsor of the law, which is Senator Calvin Musselman, I believe is how you say his last name. He said, quote, "Protecting kids while preserving freedom is not a new concept. SB 73 is about accountability, requiring companies that profit from material harmful to minors to take reasonable steps to help prevent access by children." Now, before I continue on what he said next, which I think is actually the crazier part, I think it's really important to clear something up, and at least my stance on this, which is I would argue this is not preserving freedom. This isn't preserving freedom for even people outside of Utah. Someone should have the freedom to access content and be able to do it in a privacy-respecting way. And there is no privacy-respecting way to do this. This isn't preventing access to just children, it's preventing access to adults as well. So this is inherently not preserving freedom for everybody along the way. This is kind of the difficulty with trying to navigate this really touchy subject. Now, here's where I think it gets crazy, and this is where I think there's a technical gap or a intentional or unintentional understanding of what this technology looks like. He says websites could, with a C, could, not should, could have a process for users to verify their age or confirm which state they're in, quote, while still preserving the encryption options for users. Now, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I've gone through all these marketing slogans like military-grade encryption and anonymous data, like anonymizing data sets and this kind of nonsense that is really hard to actually prove. There's all these marketing phrases that are used, and this man just goes out and throws out preserving the encryption options for users. This is the kind of person who's going to say, well, they used HTTPS on the website when you uploaded your ID, so it's encrypted. And it's like, well, that's just the data in transit to make sure there's no middleman, that's actually intercepting that ID that you're uploading. What are those encryption options that you're talking about? There is absolutely no discussion right now about even zero knowledge proofs really in the US. That's kind of happening in Europe. I did some coverage for that recently. That is at least a step in the right direction, but that still calls into question the freedom of information, even when it's done properly in a privacy and security respecting way. That's open source. None of these US politicians that I've seen are actually proposing this. They're just saying, yeah, these websites got to figure out it's their problem. But them trying to offload all of that responsibility onto a provider is also jeopardizing all users and their data along the way. And it's very reckless. If they are going to pass this, which I don't agree with, by the way, I don't agree with age verification in the first place, but even if I was in support of age verification, I would still be a big proponent of finding out a way to do it safely so that it's not just going to chuck a ton of users' data out into the ether with no regulation and no thought behind it, which is what this guy is saying when he's saying, oh yeah, people could preserve the encryption options for users. Like, yeah, I really hope that websites asking for my ID are actually using a proper SSL certificate. That's a good starting point. Thank you, Mr. Musselman. I'm getting really angry talking about this. Stay subscribed if you want to see more coverage for it. I'm sure I'll make a dedicated video on it coming soon. Okay, this is a pretty wild ride from Microsoft. I swear, every week that we do this podcast, Microsoft does something else that just makes me question what they're thinking back there. And every time I'm like, well, this can't get worse, it somehow gets worse. So Microsoft Edge, which is the default browser that Microsoft tries to shove down everybody's throat, that's not even an opinion, that is a fact. Every update, there's been reports from the Mozilla team, they've done studies now that show all the dark patterns that Microsoft does on Windows to try to get you to use Edge. It can even undo your default browser during some updates. It's crazy. But yes, that browser they're trying to shove down your throat apparently has been saving all of your passwords in the password to your device's memory, and doing it in plain text. Now, I'm going to say Tom because I don't know how to pronounce the letter O with a line through it. That is a new concept to me. So I'm going to call him Tom, which I think is accurate, and there's no line through that O. So that's good for me in my pronunciation. But he actually went public. We talked earlier about kind of what a typical vulnerability disclosure looks like. And so this researcher went public, but because Microsoft wrote him off, which is typically the next best thing. So if somebody goes to a company with a real problem and the company doesn't respond or they ignore them, and that researcher tries their best, it's a little bit more acceptable for them to then go public, because then at least there will be public pressure to fix the issue. Now, Microsoft looked at this problem and responded to him saying, quote, Microsoft Edge loads all of your saved passwords into memory in clear text, even when you're not using them. What's so fascinating is that even though Edge is based on Chromium, which is what Chrome is based on, this isn't even a behavior in Google Chrome. This is an Edge-specific behavior. To be clear here, what this means is that if somebody has administrative access to your machine, they can exploit this vulnerability. And what they can do is they just access the memory of all logged in user processes, and then your passwords would just be in there. I'll touch on my thoughts on this in a second, but the Microsoft response to this is, quote, safety and security are foundational to Microsoft Edge. Access to browser data as described in the reported scenario would require the device to already be compromised. Design choices in this area involve balancing performance, usability, and security, and we continue to review it against evolving threats. Browsers access password data and memory to help users sign in quickly and securely. This is an expected feature of the application. We recommend users install the latest security updates and antivirus software to help protect against security threats. Now, my initial gut reaction to reading this, again, this is more of an emotional reaction, is that this is quite lazy, right? I think there is always some kind of thing that you can say is someone else's problem or that's intended by design. If I build a website and it has some kind of vulnerability in it, but the website's vulnerability can only be exploited if something else down the chain gets exploited, then I can just say, well, that's out of scope, that assumes too many things, so this is actually working as designed. But I would argue that's not best practice. Best practice is to assume and try to protect your users at every step of the process. And we know that Microsoft kind of has that same carelessness to Windows as an operating system, and what they're actually depending on here is themselves. So imagine I was like, oh, hey, yeah, there is this exploit. Yeah, I know you guys are reporting this exploit on my website, but it's okay because the downstream or upstream person would also need to be exploited. Oh, but that person's also me. So that's what Microsoft's doing here. They're pretty much saying, hey, yeah, Microsoft Edge has this problem, but it's okay because it would require someone to compromise Microsoft Windows. But what do we see? We see Microsoft do a lot of really lazy things as well on the Microsoft Windows side of things, also sometimes from a security perspective. And so I think that this is just lazy. It's careless. It's not thinking about, well, what if something goes wrong? It's also maybe too much confidence in their own product in some ways that I don't know where that's coming from the last year or two, as Microsoft has not had a strong couple years. I really struggle to follow Microsoft's reasoning and their explanation for this. I'm not saying there isn't any layer of legitimacy to it. I just think that, especially coming from them as a company and their history and their lack of explanation on what it's actually providing, I'm inclined to say that this is something that should be fixed, especially when every other browser doesn't have this problem. So I think no matter...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. You can view the rest of it at your leisure. In the last 6 days, Microsoft's reversed their decision about this feature of Microsoft Edge. And so some update coming down the road of Edge will have this corrected in some fashion. My solution to all browsers that provide the ability to save your account login credentials, I turn it off. I never ever use the browsers to save any login credentials to anywhere. And I use a separate password manager, and it can be accessed by any of my machines because it's encrypted on my machine, and a copy is sent up to the cloud, and therefore it's accessible on any machine, even ones I don't own. If I log in to, say, a library machine, as an example, I can go up and attach to the password manager in the cloud, log in, go to any of my accounts that are on that password manager, do my business, and when I get done, the normal process in the libraries is to automatically re-image the computer. In other words, the current version that you were running gets wiped out by a standard default version for the next person. So I would feel reasonably confident there. And it works so far on mobile devices as well. So I got the best of all worlds as far as that goes. And I never have believed in using browsers to save any passwords, let alone it used to be the saving of account credentials was all unencrypted, meaning that it was plain text. And then they came out and made a big change on all the browsers to encrypt the password, which gave a bit of security to it. But they still have your account information and your user login name readily available in plain text that malware or a hacker can get their hands on. And they can start guessing what the passwords might be. They have all kinds of tools to do a forced brute force type attack on that account until they break in successfully. Then they can take over your account if they want to. So that's where that comes from. For Linux, they were talking about the one problem. Excuse me. There are 4 alike problems. They're different. They require different patching, but there are 4 of them out there, and I'm not joking when I say it. And how fast they're going to get patched, honest to God, I have no idea. I can go to the customized menu here, but here's, because of time, we got about a quarter of an hour left. What the heck? All right. Dirty little secret exposed. I'm going to go to this one.
They really are doing Linux dirty at the moment. In just a few weeks, researchers have publicly exposed a string of closely related Linux root escalation bugs. We've got copy fail, dirty frag, fragnesia, and now we have dirty decrypt. How long before we're at the Linux dirty dozen? In this example, I'm running Ubuntu 2404, so LSB underscore release-a shows us that, so 2404 LTS. If I try and escalate to root, so become root, I'll enter in some random password. Notice it's not accepted. I am not root. ID shows me that I'm David. My ID is 1000. So again, who am I? Shows that I'm David, and my UID is 1000. So notice please that I'm not root, but I will become root without putting in any password. All I'm going to do is go to my demo directory, and I'm going to run a Python script without sudo. So Python 3 copy fail exploit.py, and notice ID shows me that I've become root. As simple as that. To become root, bypass all authentication, no password was put in. I have escalated my privileges from a standard user to becoming root. I'll exit out of here. Type SU. Notice, who am I? Root. Exit. Who am I? David. ID. There's my ID, but SU, ID, I am root. I was able to become root without entering any root password. So just in case people think I put some kind of password in that file, I'll type less copy fail exploit.
Now, I don't know that these are all from the same source trying to prove the point, but apparently somebody was ignored for a while that is in the security area, and nothing happened. Now all of a sudden there are simple Python scripts out there that can execute any one of these 4, and who knows how many others that haven't yet been discovered that work basically the same way. And the end result is suddenly our Linux systems that were pretty darn secure are very vulnerable to certain attacks. However, I'm not sure how well this works on Fedora 44 that runs SE Linux, because that's hardcore. These other versions of Linux use AppArmor, and AppArmor did not detect a problem. So I think with SE Linux it might have stopped it, but I'm not sure. Any questions or comments? Okay. Now I'll go back to the other one. Customizing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to customize the Linux menu, and that's this menu right down here. And we're going to be looking at 3 main sections: content, appearance, and behavior. And these settings will let you tweak how the menu looks, what it shows, how it reacts. And so let's just jump right in. Now the first thing though, you'll notice that when I click on the menu, that it's kind of short. It doesn't display a lot. Like look at all applications, it doesn't have a lot. Now this is a fresh install of Mint. So what you can do is you can extend this. If you go here, just bring the mouse up. You'll notice it at the top, it shows a little line and then a little triangle under it. So if you click and hold, and we can just drag this right up, and you'll notice it shows a lot more of these applications. So let's start by right-clicking on the menu button. So we right-click and let's select Configure. And these are the three menu items I was talking about: Content, Appearance, and Behavior. Now, if you look at the top, it says Places. Now, the places are these icons right here underneath my avatar. We have the home, the desktop, and the documents turned on. So if we turn on Downloads, Music, Pictures, Videos, and I'll show you other bookmarks in a second, you'll notice all of them show up here. So I don't have to go to Nemo to access these folders, and I don't have to put them on the desktop either. I can select them right from here. Now, other bookmarks, you'll notice I turn on other bookmarks and nothing happens. Well, other bookmarks are for Nemo bookmarks. So let's just open up Nemo. Now, there's a hidden bookmark feature here, and it doesn't open up until you decide to put a bookmark here. So what I'm going to do, let's just grab one of these. Let's grab Copy. And if we drag it down to the left, watch what opens up. You'll notice a bookmark menu opens up. And if I just drag it right in there, I now have bookmarks. So if we look here, I have other bookmarks. So if we go to the menu, you'll notice that copy folder is in there. So let's bring this back over. Let's say this temp folder. I can bring that over here and I can put it in my bookmarks as well. And then you'll notice here, there it is. So if I just click on it, there it is. So I have quick access to all of my my normal places, and then I have access to my extra bookmarks. So now let's go to Content. Sidebar basically turns the whole sidebar on and off. If I turn that off, you'll notice the whole sidebar is gone. So let's turn that back on, and there it is right there. Avatar, that's this right here, and I'll show you how to change that in a minute. That's the picture right here. And then favorites and recents, if they're turned on, they will show up right here underneath the application categories right here. And now we'll go to the menu editor in a minute, but let's go to Appearance. And now the search bar here is at the bottom. I can change it and put it at the top. If I go to at the top, you'll notice the search bar goes way up here. And then the position of the system buttons. Now the system buttons are these three right here. The lock, the switch user, and then the power off. Now if I want to move those, I can put them up here next to the search bar. So right now it's in the sidebar. I can move them alongside the search bar, and you notice there they are. So if I move that search bar to the bottom, and then those system buttons end up on the right. So I'm going to put those back in the sidebar because I like them there. Easy access. And now show application descriptions. What that is you'll notice all my applications have a little description underneath them. For instance, Audacity, record and edit audio files. Now if I turn that off, you'll notice that those descriptions have completely disappeared. So I like those on. Now the next one is use symbolic icons for categories. Now the category icons are right here: accessories, education, graphics. And right now it's showing colored icons. But if I turn on use symbolic icons, what that will do, that will switch it from the normal full color icons to symbolic icons. Basically, symbolic icons are just simplified monochrome icons. And some people like those better. I kind of like the color ones, but you know, I can go either way. But if we turn those back off, you'll notice that the colored ones show right back up again. Now the category icon size, that is the size of these icons right here, and we can switch that. Let's just turn that way down. You'll see what happens. They get really small, and I changed those. I like to have them in the 20s. I'm not particular about, you know, how big they are, just as long as they're good enough size to see. Application icons, same thing. That's the icons for this one right here. If we turn those down, you notice that all of the application icons are smaller. And then the sidebar icon size, that's these right here. So if we turn those way down, you notice how small they get. I usually keep those up in the 20s too, but I'm not too particular. And then maximum sidebar width, that's just the width of the whole sidebar, and you can change that too. And now down below we have the panel. Now what this is, use a custom icon and label. So now That's this icon right here, the LM, the standard Linux Mint one. Now, if I turn that off, of course, you just, that's all you get. But if you want to edit that, you can turn it on. And then I can select a different icon. So if we click on this, it'll give us a whole bunch of icons. And if I want to use my own, all I have to do is go browse. And I can actually use my icon here. So let's browse. And then you'll notice it is my custom icon down here. Now I can change its size if I just click on the plus button. And then I can actually put text to it too. And then we have behavior. So change categories on hover. So if you look here when I go to categories, you'll notice that I don't have to click. It just opens it up like graphics, internet, office, science. I don't have to click. If I turn that off and then I go back here and scroll, you'll notice they don't open. I have to click on each one. I'm not sure why anybody would like that, but the option is there. Enable auto scrolling in application list. So what that is here, I'm not clicking. I'm going down to the bottom and it's auto scrolling. If I turn that off, it will not auto scroll. I have to actually spin my center mouse button. So I like to have that on. And then keyboard shortcut to open and close the menu. I don't use that because basically I just like to click. It's much easier than taking my hands off the mouse and using shortcuts. So I don't use any of that. So let's change this avatar here. So if we click on the menu and we just click on that avatar right there, I can change this picture right here. So I can change it to anything. I can even use my own custom picture. And then I come up with this cartoonish picture that somebody did of me like 20 years ago. So that cartoonish picture actually ends up right there. And it's actually kind of cool. If you want to use your own picture, I'm not a big fan of putting my own picture and stuff. But oh, let's do the guitar. I like that. There we go. That looks good. So then lastly, we have the menu editor. Now, I'm not going to go into much detail with this because, in my opinion, I think this is one of Linux Mint's weakest links. The problem with it is that Linux Mint uses what's called .desktop files, and it's a configuration file. So the configuration, the .desktop file needs to match the configuration in the menu editor, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you got to do extensive editing and they don't show up. You'll copy things around. In other words, let me just show you. So we have games, right? Let's go to internet. Let's copy Thunderbird into the games. Now, right now, games is not showing in the categories. Now, if I paste this in, should show. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Oh, look, it doesn't show. Even though I drop something into the games application category, it doesn't show. Now, sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And so it's one of these things where it's just really frustrating. I don't use the menu editor. If I need to actually change things around, which is very rare, I use an application called Menu Libra, and it's right here. This works so much better than the built-in menu editor in Linux Mint. And so now, like I say, I don't use it that much. There's not really any reason for me to be moving these categories around, because I think that the way when you install an application, I think it does a really good job of putting it into the category that it needs to be in. But if you really wanted to actually edit the main menu, I could do a tutorial on Menu Libra. But for now, I think it's just, in my opinion, I think it's just the default works just perfectly fine for me, and so I don't worry about the menu editor. I think it's quirky, and I think that Linux Mint needs to work on it. So, anyways, that is editing.
Any comments on that? Time is pretty much up for the day anyhow. So I'm going to get ready to put the, come on, now. Stop the share. Oh, the heck? Okay, now Come on, open up. Okay, the handout should be out there. Dennis, did you get your copy? It's in the chat. How about you, Peter?
Yes.
Wayne? Bob, did you get your copy?
Good to
I was,
go.
I was on mute, but I got mine. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make
Okay.
sure.
Good to go.
All right. I'll make one meeting announcement and that's it. Remember, Keeping Up with Tech with Sanford normally would have been on the 4th of June. He's going to be out of town. So he's going to reschedule it for Monday the 1st. So be watching for his announcements and invite as far as getting into that meeting on Monday night. That's this very next Monday. Okay. I'm going to stop